Eighth grade. I will try to be quick here. We are in chapter 2, section 4 today, as you can maybe see whenever this possibly works. How about now? There you go. I'm sorry again for Tuesday not having a video for you for section 3. Like I said, in classroom and doing that stuff, I sent home. I had a meeting that day, and so there was really no way for me to do it. I am still working on possibility of trying to get this going live during class for you to watch later on. I've done some experiments towards that, and they've not gone well so far, if I'm being really honest. So for the next little bit, at least, it'll keep being these relatively short. You know, I know they're long, but they're 20 minutes long compared to 45 minutes in class. I still think you're getting a good bargain. There will be, of course, an attendance question at the end of, or somewhere towards the end of the video. I don't want you to just try to skip through to find it, so I try to put them in random different places. But I also don't want to put it at the very beginning, so you can just watch the very first part and quit watching. So with that said, progress reports should be coming around. They're going home with in-person learners today. Yours will probably be mailed. Presumably, they'll be mailed out today, so you should be getting yours by the end of the week. Your social studies grade is just going to be, it's 120 points right now. You had a 100-point test, and you got 20 points for doing your study guide last time. And so basically, your Chapter 1 test grade is going to be your grade. You should know your Chapter 1 test grade. It's in Google Classroom. If you go to classwork, you click on Chapter 1 test, then view assignment, I think. And again, I have the teacher version, you have the student version, so I had to help some students here find theirs. And so I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it says, but if it's not, you'll have to pardon me. But that's where your grade should be available. So if you don't know your grade, first of all, sorry, the test was 2 weeks ago. I should have made this clearer first, but if not, that's how you find that. And in Chapter 2 test, which is coming up probably the end of next week, if you can't find your grade right away, because I should have them graded the day of, please feel free to message me, whether that's through Remind, email, Google Classroom, or a private message on Google Classroom. Most of you, I can tell, know how to do that because I've been getting several private messages, and that's great. And you guys have been doing a good job of keeping it school-related and appropriate, so I appreciate that also. Seventh graders, maybe not so much, but that's their problem, not yours. So when we left off, we talked about the war at home. We talked about, like I said, you didn't get to hear me talk about it, which is okay, but it's, I feel bad that you didn't, because it's one of the funnier ones, especially when we talk about Clara Barton, who was the inventor of of not only the Red Cross. She founded and created the Red Cross, but she also invented first aid. And it's funny to talk about how before and this is 1862, 63. And so before she did that, they used the military tent in the Army, first come, first serve. And so I could just run through a thorn bush and get a scratch or turn my ankle, and another guy could get shot in the throat. But if I came in first, they were like, all right, let's ice this guy's ankle down first, and then we'll, that guy bleeding from the neck, we'll get him later. He's dead. And so she came in and she was like, hey, why don't we treat the people, it's called triage. Why don't we treat the people that are actually in danger of dying first? And the people were like, oh, whoa, what a great idea. She also invented the idea of first aid, which is like, hey, instead of getting every human giant male body and dragging it back to the medical tent, why don't we just bring some bandages out to the field? And they were like, wow, I like the way you think. And so this is really when, before this, women weren't even allowed to be nurses. And she was the one that, and then we realized what a terrible job it was. And nursing became almost all women for a century because, sexism and, patriarchy. Usually men will think they're the only ones that can do a hard job. And then once they realize they're not, they give the job entirely to women. And so now you're seeing that going back and forth. Now more men are becoming nurses, and it's becoming more, it's still a generally female-dominated field, but not entirely. So you missed some good stuff talking about that. But today we're talking about not the very, very, very end of the war, but we're getting closer. because Robert E. Lee is moving his army back into Virginia after Antietam. And this is really encouraging. Basically, the South is on the run. And the North is like, all right, now's the opportunity that we've got to really take it to them. And so Ambrose Burnside is going to march towards Richmond. The problem with Richmond is, it's very close to the North. So, it's a pretty obvious target, but also because it's literally the capital. And that means not only is it a pretty obvious target, but it's heavily fortified. The South is going to have troops upon troops upon troops there waiting. And it's also, like I said, a target that's pretty obvious. And so once Burnside started marching towards Richmond, it was pretty clear to the pretty much the entire earth that was paying attention, but specifically Robert E. Lee and other Southern generals, that he's marching on Richmond, Virginia, the Confederate capital. And so there's really only, a handful of ways to get there. And so once they see the way he's going, they're ready for him. So they're waiting alongside the roads on the way to on the way to Richmond in Fredericksburg. And basically they are, the vocab word and the word you'll see in this chapter is entrenched. And that basically means they were up on the sides of hills and they were dug into literal trenches. And so, if you, I'm not gonna try to do art on this. I'm afraid I'll ruin the whole thing. But you could picture this in your head. If you've got a hill, right, and you've got this angle going up, and you cut a trench into it, okay, and you dug down in that trench, you really can't even see the people when you're looking up at them, which is a huge advantage. And so, really, what the South did is they waited for the Union to be really even bottlenecked. Okay, they put up not some blockades, but some blockages, I guess I should say, on the roads. And when the Union had to stop and try to clear it off, they were waiting on the hills, and they really ambushed them. And so, being up high up in hills during the war, during this time, is a massive, massive, massive advantage. You hear old-timey war people all the time talk about having the high ground. In fact, we use it as a phrase now to just mean to be, I'm in the right and you're in the wrong. I have the moral high ground. But the idea that the Union to defeat have to climb the hill, and the South can duck down into their trenches and are literally, if they're not peeking their head out like a little game of whack-a-mole at Chuck E. Cheese's, then they literally cannot be seen. And that's when you add on to the fact that climbing the hill is harder, and they can actually even throw stuff out of their little trenches or bunkers and, use a Donkey Kong attack where it just rolls down at these people. And so, again, you can visualize this, and you can Google entrenched positions and see a picture of what I'm talking about. But you can envision this. If you've got a hill and then you got a trench cut into the side, hiding down in that trench makes you invisible to people on the ground. And so you could shoot the people down on the ground. The people on the ground can't shoot at you unless, again, you're poking your head out. And so that provides you a massive advantage, because the people down on the bottom have to get all the way to the top of the hill to be able to effectively attack you. And all you've got to do is stop them from doing so. So Burnside really got destroyed. And we talked about, and we'll talk about here in a second, but really Lincoln couldn't find anybody to be not a general in the Army to lead one specific division or force, but the commander of the entire Union forces. He could not find somebody to run the entire show that satisfied how he thought the war should be fought. Now, on one hand, you're like, so what? He's the president. He's not general in the war. He should leave the tactics to the people that are actually fighting the war, and that's fine. Sorry, I've got to fuel up on coffee before I'm ready for my in-person classes today. But on the other hand, as you learned when we did the Constitution last year, the president is, in fact, commander-in-chief of the entire military forces. He is, if you think of the structure of the military as a pyramid, and you have whatever ranks are on bottom, then you have generals, and it goes on and up. The very, very, very tippy top is the president. He's in charge of the military, the Army, the Navy, now the Air Force. Of course, we didn't have the Air Force back then, but you get the idea. And so he makes all the decisions, and also his head's going to be on the line. I mean, I don't want to make a I didn't mean to make a pun there that, he's going to, his head's going to roll if they get, if the Union gets defeated, he's going to be kicked out as president. Of course, now knowing what we know about him being assassinated, I didn't mean that pun to happen, but if it fits, it fits. So Burnside got destroyed, and he quit. He was so embarrassed. He's like, he quit. He was replaced by Joseph Hooker. Your question just to ask you for 4 men that led the army. There are really only, I'm sorry, I asked you for 5 men that led the army. There are really only 4 in this chapter. The 5th one is coming up in the next section. I shouldn't say chapter, I should say section. And that's Ulysses S. Grant. And that's what we were talking about, Lincoln not being able to find the guy that fought the war that he wanted to fight it the way he wanted to be fought. That was a nightmare of a sentence, but I think you know what I was trying to say. Until Grant, and Grant was the one person that would actually constantly attack. Okay, and so the Battle of Chancellorsville was a victory for the South also, but it was also a huge defeat for the South, and I'll explain what I mean here. And so Lee split up his forces. And so basically, he had the Union fighting basically forces in 2 different directions. And although they were smaller forces, they were fighting well and they were occupying the Union. And in the meantime, he had a 3rd force basically sneak around the back of the Union, all right, while the battle's going on. And so you can imagine you're pew, 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 shooting at each other across the field, and you got 2 people in 2 different directions, or 2 forces in 2 different directions. And all of a sudden, a 3rd group comes from you from behind. You are, as they say, up a creek without a paddle. And so this is really a dominating victory for the South. And so the Union realizes immediately, like, we are in trouble. We literally have people on our left and people on our right firing guns at us, but now we have people behind us, and so they are the cream in a being murdered Oreo, basically. And so they have to run away, and so the battle lasts basically all day, and they exit out the side, and they're running and running and running. And so one thing about war during Civil War time is it creates a lot of dust, it creates a lot of smoke. Every shot of a gun, every fire of a cannonball is literally a fire. Right, you have to have a spark and a fire to ignite that gunfire to create, and so it's just almost visibility is almost zero. So as the battle's ending, you have the South. If you imagine I'm the Union and the South's firing from both sides, and then all of a sudden I leave and they're there. They can't see, they can't see the Union leave or not. And so one dude from the Confederacy is like, I don't know, the Union's probably there, and he shoots and he hits Stonewall Jackson in the arm. Now getting hit in the arm in 2020. First of all, is not good. I'm not saying go out and get shot in the arm. In fact, I would very strongly recommend that you don't. However, it's a lot better now to be shot in your arm than in May of 1863 to be shot in your arm. And so once Stonewall Jackson was shot in the arm, this is basically, it sets off basically a timer for his death. The first thing they do is literally just saw off your arm, amputate it, cut off the blood, and then you have to hope that gangrene and a blood infection doesn't set in. But it did, and so he not only did he die from this, but he died slowly and very painfully. You read about it in your book yesterday, and you should have read about it in your book. Again, not all of you are actually doing this, which is a problem. Those of you that are doing this are doing mostly a good job, and we'll start talking about your test questions and reviewing for that later on, maybe tomorrow and at the beginning of next week or whatever. But anyway, as I read the book, Robert E. Lee gave one of the most savage burns in the history of Earth, but he did it on accident. He was trying to compliment Stonewall Jackson. So Stonewall Jackson, like I said, gets shot in the arm, and he's, over the course of 7 days, basically screaming in agony and dying. And as he is on his deathbed, Robert E. Lee gives a speech over him, to tell him what he means to him while he's still alive, so we can hear it, which is a nice thought. And he says, you've lost your left arm, but I feel like I've lost my right. I know this is my right. I know it's mirrored in the camera here, but anyway. So, yeah. So he's trying to be nice and saying, like, you're so important to me that I feel like I've lost my right arm with you dying. But in the meantime, Stonewall Jackson is laying there literally dying and literally has lost his arm. And he had to be like, are you serious right now, bro? You're saying that you feel like you've lost your arm? Like, I have like maggots and pus and, a gross infection on my arm, and I'm dying today. So maybe chill out a little bit with, like, I've lost my arm too. You know what I mean? So anyway, Stonewall Jackson was one of the main reasons that the Confederates were even able to do as well as they were. So the Union generals, you had McClellan, you had Burnside, you had Meade, you had Hooker. Sorry, you had McClellan, you had Burnside, you had Hooker, now you have Meade. You don't have to put them in order, but that's just for my own sanity. I like to put them in order. And so basically what you had is all one way or the other. You either had people that were like, I'm not going to attack. I don't want to send my generals. I don't want to get my people killed, which is fine. But when you're fighting a war, it's going to be a necessary evil at times. Or you had people like Burnside who were just like, I don't know. And so there's a fine line between being aggressive and being stupid. And so when at the Battle of Fredericksburg, where there's like 3 times as many Confederate forces and they're all up on the top of hills and they're marching into Richmond, which is just incredibly fortified with guns and troops everywhere. And you're just like, yeah, let's just give it a shot, or you're just sitting there like, oh, I don't want to fight. We might get hurt. I mean, general life advice, that's a good idea, but in a war that doesn't really work out. And so Lincoln, he gave a really smart alecky quote in the book too, like if I can't remember which one he's talking about. I think it was McClellan. Like, if he's not going to use the army, I'd like to borrow it for a little bit. So African Americans in the war, of course, the South didn't let them fight. The South, the whole thing for the South is that they're fighting to keep African Americans or people of color as slaves. So they're not going to give them guns, of course. However, it makes no sense at all for the North to not allow that. And so the idea behind it at first was that like they would be resented by the Northerners who were also racist, and that's somewhat true. They would take the heaviest fire from the South, and that's true. But the idea is like if you're going to allow people to be free, you have to allow people to make their own decisions. And nobody was more eager to fight than people of color because their literal lives and freedom are on the line. And so as you read about, again, you should have read the book. As you read about the book, once these regiments started being formed, one white general said, this is the best troop or best regiment or whatever that I've ever seen by far. And so the 54th Massachusetts, they became known for their sacrifice. They tried to take Fort Wagner in South Carolina. It didn't work, but they were outnumbered like 10-1, and they still almost did it. The movie Glory is about this. It's a really famous movie with Denzel Washington, and they won some Oscars back in like the 80s, which is like the Stone Age now, but I was alive when it came out. So Gettysburg was not an important location. It was basically an accident. Basically, if my face is the town, the South is marching one way and the North is marching another way, and they say to town like, hey, let's stop in. And they're like, oh, they fight on my nose. And so this is a 4-day battle, and this is really considered to be the turning point of the war. Britain and France realize, hey, the South can't win this. We're not going to help them. Let's just pretend like, hey, we don't have anything to do with this. Okay. So this is really the turning the tide, the turning point of the war. This is where it became pretty obvious to anyone except a few people in the South that the North is going to win. Okay. Attendance question. Let's say, what is your favorite food? Pizza, steak, I don't know, vegan hot dogs, whatever. Doesn't matter if you're telling the truth or not. You can tell me I love to eat caviar. I eat it with every meal. We're very rich. I don't care. The point is that you heard this question and you understand how to answer it because you were here and watching this video. So like I said, Gettysburg, the Union did not retreat. It turned back one Confederate attack after another. Pickett's charge is the most famous part of this war. The Confederates were like depleted and they were losing, but they were like, hey, let's give it a shot. And basically both sides were entrenched. And the South was just like, hey, maybe let's just run in front of their machine guns and see if that works. And their cannons and their, I say machine guns. They had basically early proto versions of what we call Gatling guns now. They weren't great, but running right in front of them is still not a great idea. And so again, if your plan involves like, hey, let's run right at their guns, you better make it work. And they didn't. So this gets Britain and France out of the war. And so Vicksburg, it is the last Confederates. Again, Confederate equals bad guys equals South equals rebels equals slavery equals traitors. Union equals United States, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and so the Gettysburg Address became famous. Now, another thing that I need to talk to you about in addition to our attendance question. There are 4 questions on the test that I did not put on your study guides. I'll try to remember to add them onto the one I'm giving out tomorrow, but the ones that I printed out, I have not. But I told them in class. So here are the 4. They're easy. Okay, the 4 questions, and I'll give you the answers right now. The 4 questions are: 2, who were the presidents of the Union and the Confederacy? And 3 and 4, what were the capitals of the Union and Confederacy? Okay, they're pretty straightforward. The Union, again, is the United States. So the president of the Union was Abe Lincoln. The capital of the Union, you should know the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. Okay, the president of the Confederacy of the South, we talked about this last chapter and all through this chapter. That's Jefferson Davis, not Thomas Jefferson, Jefferson Davis. And the capital, of course, is Richmond, Virginia. Okay, so hopefully you stuck with me all the way through. You're going to miss that test question. So those 4 test questions, but you should get them anyway. You should know those. But I'll try to add them somewhere and also notify you in Google Classroom. Okay, we are 21 minutes. I'm going to see if I can get this video uploaded before like lunch, because the internet is not having a great couple weeks here. But I will see you pretty soon, or you'll see me at least, and have a good rest of the day. And by the way, a lot of you are coming in to pick up stuff Tuesdays and Thursdays. I haven't put anything down there because your stuff's all online for me. I spend hours every day putting this all where you could do it from your computer. So there should be no reason for you to pick up anything from me. So if you go down and you think you're missing something, that's not true. It's just I'm not doing any papers and stuff because you can do all your stuff online for me. So there's that. So anyway, you guys have a good day. Keep wearing your mask if you go out. Stay safe, wash your hands, and all that good stuff. And I'll see you later. Bye.